Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this coverage of my round 5 game from the Western 2017 Western Class Championship. After 4 rounds, I was at 1.5 points, so not a great score. But with a win in the final round, I could at least get back to break even, and that would, considering all my opponents were higher rated, that would add a few points to my rating. And even though it's not a great performance, it would be okay. It would sort of be keeping up with my opposition there, who were other lower rated Class A players for the most part. But in round 5, I was once again paired up against a youngster, a young man with a rating of 1858. So that makes 4 youngsters in a row. I actually paused at this point to do a count. I looked around at the boards nearby. There were like 6 boards on the tables that were in the little group I was in. And so of those 12 players on the 6 boards, 7 of them were adults. So it was just bad luck. It's not like kids were dominating this tournament. It was just bad luck on my part that I kept getting paired against them. Anyway, I had the black pieces, and my opponent started off with d4. Play knight f6. He goes c4. So I go for the Nimzo-Indian with e6, and he obliges by playing knight c3. And then he plays knight f3, the Kasparov variation of the Nimzo. So I go with c5, and right here he plays an unusual move. The top move in the database was actually g3, although in this position what I see more often is the second choice move in the database, e3. E3 makes a lot of sense, just kind of shoring up the center once c5 has put a little pressure on it, and prepared to take back with a pawn if I ever take there, so that white keeps a grip on those center squares. But my opponent tried something completely different, bishop g5. And, well, it's not the best move in the position, but it's still interesting. Still probably keeps an edge for white, like, most opening moves keep some slight edge for white, except for outright blunders. So I was wondering how to deal with this. I hadn't actually seen this move before, and I was thinking it might be nice just to take. Maybe that's a good idea, because it opens up this diagonal for my bishop to come back and break the pin. I still hadn't decided where to develop this knight, but if I'm going to ever free up my queen from this square, I might have to place the knight on d7. So this bishop g5 move, it's sort of hindering my development in a way. It's forcing my development in certain channels when, really maybe in most cases I would prefer to put my knight on c6 rather than on d7. And the second advantage of taking is that, it gets rid of one of white's center pawns in exchange for one of my wing pawns. So seems like a good exchange. Those moves are okay. In the book, the moves that have been played before were, in addition to what I played, which is also a book move, it turns out, h6 or just castling are also reasonable things to do at that point. But I took, and then normally white takes back with the knight. My opponent really goes out of book here with this move, queen e4. And at this point, probably I've equalized, because this gives me a free tempo. Knight takes d4, and white still has some edge, but after knight to c6, he drops his queen back. And actually, there's even a tactic in this position, which I didn't spot, although I played this tactic. I found it on the next move, and I played it. So if you want to pause the video, why don't you see if you can look for a tactic here. I will say this tactic doesn't win any material, but it's kind of an interesting move. Okay, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. See if you can find that tactic and work it out on your own. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and a few moves in the game and get to the place where I played the tactic. So in this position, I just played a6, just keeping his knight out of b5, and allows me to develop my queen, or maybe push d6 at some point, without having to worry about the knight hopping into b5 to harass the d6 and the c7 squares. So he responded by playing a3, kicking my bishop. And it was this point I was thinking, and I don't really want to retreat the bishop, and I was looking around for other ideas, and it's at this point that I spotted the tactic. And the move is knight to e4. Now if we go back to that previous position, I'm moving the knight, attacking his queen, and he's attacking my queen. And it's complicated. There's a number of different lines. But let's go back to the very first time I had the chance. It was right after I played knight c6, and he went queen d2. I actually had the chance to play knight e4 right here. And it's maybe even better in this line because my bishop isn't hanging. The chess engine gives this as the best continuation. Bishop takes, knight takes, king takes, and king takes. And, well, compared to what happened in the game, what's better for me in this line is that I have the bishop pair. So I could have gotten into an endgame where I've got the bishop pair, and I just need to open up some lines here by pushing my pawns forward, and this should be a slightly favorable endgame for black. But like I said, I didn't spot the idea here. I played a6, he played a3, and while I was trying to figure out how to deal with this situation, I realized, I can kind of divert things a little bit by playing knight e4 here. And now in this position, there's a lot of different possibilities. For example, he could actually just take the bishop. The thing is, even though his queen is hanging, my queen is hanging too. So now to justify the sacrifice of the bishop, I have to take his queen. He can take my queen, and it might look like I'm going to end up a piece down, but I have this move here. Knight takes f3 check with tempo. So I had to calculate all this out to make sure I came out at least okay in every line. And this position is interesting. It's even material, and black has, or white has some problems in his pawn structure. Although to compensate, he has more space than black does. So it's an interesting position. Let's see. He didn't play that way. He took the queen. And, of course, this is a line I had calculated. I take the knight. And then king takes d2 is what he played here. Let's see. After I took the queen, he took the knight with his king. But let's go back. In this position, I also had to worry about what if he takes here with the knight. I actually expected him to take with the knight, but I realized I could take this knight with tempo. And so, well, he could save his bishop, or he can take my bishop, and taking, and I take. And once again, we get into a position where the material is even, but I have a slightly better pawn structure than white, and white maybe has a little more space and a little easier development. So different kind of trade-offs. What he did was he took with the king, and after I took with the bishop, he kept taking with the king. So I think he selected the best outcome for white among all the possible ways that things could have gone after that knight e4 tactic. He actually found the best one. So good play from white there. It was maybe a little bit careless of him to move his queen out and bring it back to d2, but he recovered from that nicely when things got sharp. Yeah, let's finish. I have to take the bishop. So the material is even, his pawn structure is not damaged, and his king is active. This is actually an asset for white. I don't have any way to exploit it. Notice my bishop is on a light square, his king is on a dark square, and at the moment my knight is only looking at these dark squares, so I'm not able to easily harass his king. And well, there's some weaknesses in my pawn structure here, which he will try to exploit. Let's see, he played e3, I played king e7. I want to get my king off the back rank, connect my rooks, and push the d-pawn forward. So he stops that with rook to d1, tries to slow it down. I eventually managed to get in that d-pawn push to d6 and later to d5. So this all works out for me. He could have tried c5, but after c5 I can still push the pawn forward, and he has nothing better than just exchanging it. So it seems like the backward nature of my pawn structure is just a temporary phenomenon. I have enough time to work it out. Let's see, he played rook d1. I went with b6 first. I wanted to stop him from playing this c5 move, give my bishop a square to develop, and I'm still going to follow up with d6. Let's see, he went bishop to e2. I go bishop b7. He goes rook d2. So he's preparing to double on the d file and get more pressure here. So I played rook a to d1. And, well, this move is rook a to d1. Yeah, I was keeping this rook over here in case his knight hops in and starts harassing the queenside pawns. But this is apparently a mistake. So rather than rook a d1, the chess engine is saying rook h to c1 is a way for black to play and keep things more or less even. Maybe it's still just a slight edge to white, but this is an interesting way to play. Of course, I'm looking at the c pawn, and the knight can hop to that square maybe and add more pressure. Maybe I can push a pawn forward, take advantage of a pin. He can support the pawn with b3 and step the king out of the way, so I don't think I win any material, but at least it gives me a few forcing moves, so it's probably better than what I played. Let's back up. So I went rook a to d8, just being prepared to push the d pawn forward, so when he doubles, I go to d6. And well, this rook is securely defended, so if he and this c5 square is under my control. So anyway, if he pushes that c pawn forward, I can take with either the b pawn or the d pawn, depending on circumstances, what looks best at the time. So all this is looking good. He does hop in with knight g5, and I play knight to e5, which I thought was a good centralizing move for my knight. But actually, my knight's not stable there. I didn't really see his reply. Let's see, what's a good reply? What's a good move here? I think maybe just doubling on the d file, rook d7. This is a suggestion from the chess engine, rook d7, f4. f4 is apparently a good move anyway. h6, kicking the knight back, knight drops back to f3. And now maybe I could double the rooks, and the game would continue. So knight e5 runs into this f4 move. I just never really thought about this f4 move. It's a little bit counterintuitive because it leaves us backwards e-pawn, but you have to recognize in this particular position there's no way to exploit that backwards e-pawn. It's on a dark square, so the bishop can't attack it. And, well, the knight can't get to any of these squares, not quickly anyway, and the bishop is guarding this square. So it's not so easy for me to get any kind of pressure against that e-pawn. In the meantime, he's gaining space. White is gaining space on the queen side and kicking my pieces around. Let's see, I drop back to g6, and he plays bishop to f3. A little bit simple how he's playing this, but he's actually got some pressure here, so he's managed to build up some kind of edge. See, I went ahead and traded the bishop off, and then I went rook d7, preparing to double over here. But he plays knight d4, and now he's threatening to come in here with knight to c6. I didn't want to allow that, so I brought my rook over to the c file, keep him from hopping in there. Let's see, and he played king b4. Interesting play from white, just activating his king and maybe preparing to expand on the queen side over here. And then in the meantime, notice my knight is kind of out of play. He's managed to, I mean, I could go to this square. That's true, but where do I go from there? These are all under his control at the moment. Although, yeah, maybe knight here to here is an idea. But other squares, I'm going backwards, it seems like, or he has them under his control. So interesting play from white. Let's see. I pushed on with d5 at this point. I figured since he had blocked the d file, his rooks are no longer generating so much pressure on this pawn, and so I could get in this d5 move, and I should do that when I get the chance, because otherwise my position is a bit cramped. So if he takes now, I'll just take back with the rook. So he played this also in a nice way. He played b3 here, just keeping the status quo. And now notice that I can't take the pawn. If you want to think about it, a little tactics quiz for you. What's the problem with taking the pawn? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. You can pause the video if you want time to think about it. But yeah, this tactic was causing me a lot of trouble in the game. It's a very important part of the game here. He can throw in the move knight to f5 check, and that opens up, since I've already moved the pawn out of the way by taking, he can throw in that check, and that opens up the this d file with tempo, and my rook is underprotected there. So say I take his knight, he just takes my rook, he takes it with check, driving my king back, and then he can take back the pawn over here, and so he just wins the exchange. So that's something I can't play into. So I had to find another way of playing this position, and I came up with rook to c5. So now I am threatening to, well, perhaps just unpin that pawn and take over here. Another idea, which the chess engine comes up with, which I think is very good, is knight to f8. You know, I was reluctant to move my knight back like that, but, well, the knight doesn't have many good squares going forward, and the knight on f8 defends the rook, so now I really am threatening to take the c-pawn. So that would be best move in this position, I think. Anyway, I went with rook c5. He went with g3. This takes squares away from my knight, so he's still kind of playing against my knight and just solidifies his king side over here. And, well, that gives me a chance to continue with my plan. And I played a5 check. And this was part of the idea of rook c5. I was getting up here to take back with one of the rooks if he takes, and have a defended rook on d5, but also with the idea of throwing this check and chasing his king back. So I wanted my rook controlling these squares so his king couldn't come forward. And so he stepped back to c3, which is a pretty natural move, but actually turns out to be a mistake. The chess engine says that king to a4 points out that king to a4 is actually pretty good for black. I hadn't, or for white. I hadn't really figured out exactly how to proceed from this position. I was a little bit worried after I noticed that he could just go there. You know, I didn't give it a lot of credit at first, but as I started thinking about it during the game, I realized that was actually a pretty good move. The thing is that, you know, there's still this problem in the center here with the tension on the d-pawn, and his king can actually help these pawns come forward, and I'm in no position to play b5 rather, and chase his king away. He's got control of the b5 square. So let's see. Play might continue. The chess engine gives the best line is this. The knight f8, once again defending the rook, and then taking. Now I can take. Oh, he takes. I played knight f8. He takes. So yeah, I'm in a position where I could take. So he takes. I can play rook d to d5 as the engine's recommendation after e4 dropping back, and then e5 and rook d to c7, just getting away from these tactics on the d file and setting up something on the c file. So line continues: b4, a takes, and rook to c4. And you know, it looks like it's not horrible, but in fact, white's much better here. The king has a square that it can come into. So what's strange is the king on the side of the board is actually pretty active, and my centralized king over here is a bit cut off, and my knight is going to take a couple moves to get into the game. I probably can play knight d7 here to defend the pawn, but anyway, advantage to white in that position. So a bit lucky for me that he went king to c3. Now I play rook d to c7, get my rooks on the c file here, taking advantage of the pin, and so he can't take immediately. And let's see, and if he tries to harass my rook, there's an important point. If he plays b4 here, then my rook can come forward and I can take on c4. So he just played on the king side here. He went g4, and now I want to take. But there's a problem with taking, and I kind of gave a hint in my last comment, but do you want to, for another tactics quiz, figure out why black can't take that pawn on c4 right now? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now, so pause the video if you want time to think about it. The answer is if I take that pawn, he can play b4 here, and now my rook can't come forward. My pawn is in the way. Well, I guess, no, there's no squares on the side, right? His pawns are covering all of these squares, and his knight is covering these two light squares here and here. So the rook has no moves. Oh, maybe it could come over here. Anyway, I get into trouble after b4. That's the answer. So I can't take right away. So I drop my rook back to c8, holding on to things. Then he plays knight to f3. And I go b5. Now I'm exploiting the pin. So actually, knight to f3 was not the best move. He needed to unpin with a move like king to b2, and still a game. Well, it's still a game in any case, but knight f3 gives me a chance here. So I play b5. Now I've got two pawns attacking this pawn on c4, and I'm actually going to end up a pawn up in this sequence. Let's see, he pushes on the king side. I drop my knight back to f8. I didn't want to exchange. That it seems to give up some squares over here. So if he takes, I'll take back with the pawn, and I'll keep control of those light squares. So just want to bring the knight back and bring it around to the queen side here to help defend against these pawns. Let's see, he went rook to d4 here. And finally, I get to take this pawn. He takes c4. And I took that without thinking too much about the alternatives. The chess engine actually prefers, if I'm going to take the pawn, well, one idea the chess engine has is just to keep the tension by playing knight d7, and it gives a pretty significant advantage to black in that position. So that would be an interesting way to play. The other way the chess engine wants to play is taking with the b pawn, and then in this sequence, not exchanging here, but dropping the rook back. Kind of a funny way to play, if you ask me. I just wanted to put this on the board to to show it. The chess engine says black is doing very well here, and it gives it a +1 advantage or so. But this looks like a position that's completely blockaded. How are these pawns ever going to make any progress? So even though I'm technically a pawn up, it's hard to see that I would ever go on to win this game. So anyway, I really didn't think too much about that way of taking. I was more concentrated on getting rid of my d-pawn weakness, and I finally had the chance. I play here, and I end up a pawn up, like I said. He pushes forward, I take, he takes, and now I drop my rook back to the 7th rank. And he immediately plays rook a1. Excellent move here. He's down a pawn, but he's got active pieces, and I still need to get my knight into the game. And he's threatening to come in on the a file and cause trouble here. Well, here attacking my pawn immediately. So the move I should play here, this is a point where I'm doing pretty well, although not clear yet if I'm winning. But the chess engine says I have to be careful. I need to play a move like rook b7, defend the pawn in advance. He plays rook a5. Let's see, I might play h6, knight to d2. This is the line, and knight to d7, finally getting my knight into the game. I guess if he takes here, I can take with the king. And a slight edge to black, but not a winning position necessarily. But, well, that would be a position I'd certainly be willing to play for when I've got the extra pawn. I can maybe open some lines over here on the king side, try and activate my rooks and chase his king away from that excellent blockading position it's in at the moment. But I didn't see the necessity of defending the pawn immediately, and I started. I thought he would play rook a5, and then I would play rook b7. So I started with this move f6, intending to follow up with e5 here, and get rid of some threats of the checks along the e file. And now he finds a very nice sequence here. He plays rook a6, hitting this pawn, and also threatening to bring his other rook into the 6th rank. And this would be pretty bad for me, so I have to block. And then he goes here to a5 to attack the pawn. And the funny thing is, I can no longer defend that pawn, because any move I play, if I defend with this rook or if I defend with this rook, it means I can't defend the 7th rank anymore. So, for example, after rook to b6, say, he can come in with this check, and my king can't, well, I can't block on this square because his 2 rooks control it. So the king has to drop back. The king can't step forward, and then at least he can pick up this g-pawn. But you see, this is turned the position around. So a nice little sequence of moves from white there. That first playing rook c6, or rook to a6, forcing me to block and kind of displacing my rooks, and then playing rook a5 in a position where I can't really defend that pawn. So anyway, I pushed on with e5 to get rid of this liability over here. And let's see. He plays rook to d5, and then I went rook to d6 to offer an exchange here. And well, the chess engine says he should really exchange. Let's see. I There was a suggestion here of knight d7 as maybe a better way to handle this position. Knight d7, I'm still going to lose this pawn. Say he plays rook d takes, and that's the recommendation. And then going rook d6, getting an open file for my rook, and also threatening, driving his king away from the front of this pawn. So yeah, that looks like a better outcome than the way I played it. I went rook d6, and he could trade here, which is the chess engine's recommendation. He takes, I take, king takes, or rook takes b5, knight to d7, getting my knight into the game finally, and knight around to d2, and rook to a8. I can't adequately defend this pawn, so I have to go for activity on the a file here, and yeah, this looks pretty good for white. He's going to win this pawn and start pushing that pawn forward. Let's see, but he didn't trade here. He just grabbed the pawn right away, played rook a to b5, and kept control of the d file here. Let's see, I took, he took, and then I played knight d7. So I'm trying to get my knight around to where I can defend that pawn, which I realized was going to be in a bit of trouble. Let's see, he played e4 to anchor his rook there, played knight b6, went rook back to a5, and rook to c7, protecting the 7th rank. And now he went rook to a6, attacking my knight. Actually, I think his best chance here was coming in with knight to d2. It's just really hard for me to keep this pawn properly protected, and he needs to activate his knight and get it into the battle. But anyway, he played rook a6 here, and I played knight to c8. So I'm going to bring my knight around to the d6 square and defend it that way. So anyway, this is move 40, and I used up all my time, but I made it to move 40, and I'm still in the game here, although I think white has the advantage. Somehow his pawn, even though they look similar, his pawn is stronger than mine. I guess because his king is better placed and is already putting pressure on my pawn, and my king is out of place. So definitely is an endgame where white has the edge. But anyway, I have time to breathe a little bit and collect my thoughts. He pushes on with b5. I go knight to d6, holding on to my pawn. He goes b6, and I went rook b7 here. There is a nice little tactical line here the chess engine finds, which maybe is better than rook to b7. And that's knight takes e4. He left that pawn hanging. That's another thing knight d2 would have done, is it would have defended that pawn as well as attacking my pawn. And it goes with check. And of course, it's always risky to do something like this when you've got a piece hanging. But his king can't come over and attack my my knight. I've got those squares covered. So king to b4 is the move here. Then rook to c8, getting out of the way of that pawn. Rook a7 check, king to d6, so giving up the g7 pawn, but in exchange activating the c pawn. And well, pretty complicated and double-edged position with chances for both sides. That's the chess engine for you. Pretty interesting. Anyway, I played more simply with rook to b7. I'm just trying to hold the line, although now I think I'm in a bit of trouble. If he goes once again with this knight d2 idea, now this pawn is under defended and my rook is not in a place where it can defend it. I would probably have to try and counterattack this pawn, but when he takes, it defends the pawn. Yeah, it's getting very tricky. But my opponent picked up his rook. He had a different idea. He picked up his rook with the intent to play rook to a7, and there's actually a problem with that move. So if you want your last tactical quiz for this video, if you want to see what is the problem with rook to a7. Yeah, if he had actually played that move, I would have had the move knight to b5 check, and that well, wins the exchange here and probably the game. And that's probably a pretty good position there for me, because I get this advanced pawn. So it'd be rook versus knight, and he probably gets my pawn. But yeah, that would be winning for me. Anyway, he didn't play that move. He picked up his rook, and then he realized his mistake, and he set it back down in the same spot and was thinking. And he thought for a while, and then he offered a draw. And well, the thing is, there's no good square for the rook. He's picked up the rook, so he has to move it somewhere. Everywhere it moves, I'm going to just take this pawn, and then I would have an edge, although not clear if it's a winning edge, depending on how he plays from that point on. But well, I was tired after 40 moves. Five rounds and 40 moves in the last game was pretty tiring. So I accepted the draw, and so that's how the tournament ended. So I ended with 2 points out of 5, so short of the break-even mark of 2.5 points, and not so great really. I mean, I had a bad start, and I kind of came back from a bad start, and I held my own. I got 2 points out of 4 games against the kids, so I held my own against the kids at least. But overall, not a great result. And it turns out I had a bad start to the year at my local chess club. I lost the first 5 games in a row, and after the first tournament was rated, my rating dropped down to 1760, and that happened before this tournament was played. So after this tournament, I actually still gained a couple of rating points with that. With 2 points out of 5, my rating went up from 1760 to 1762. But I have another tournament from the local club that hasn't been rated yet, and my rating will probably drop another 20 points as a result of that. So I have sadly been knocked down to Class B territory. So the next big tournament I play, and I'll probably play in Class B. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a chance to see how things are going in that category. And well, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.